Best ball is back, and so are we, myself, Tom Strachan, all the way from across the pond, once again, alongside Andrew Erickson for another summer of best ball content. Andrew, best ball season really kicked into gear after the NFL draft. How's it been treating you so far?
It feels like it never really ended. It feels like it just carried over from last summer into the draft season. And then obviously, I think we were both in the pre-draft best ball streets, drafting some of these teams, trying to get that sweet closing line value. Even though
That's what it's
most
all
of the time
about.
it seems like it evens out. I know that I'm sitting on a fat bag of Tyler Shuck in fast draft when he was going in like round 5. So that doesn't mean he's going to be good, but he's going to be starting games. So I feel good about my CLV right there, but we'll see how things shake out. But I'm excited to be here and excited to chop it up, talking best ball.
Yeah, we've got a lot planned for the best ball season, but today we're going to run through some rookies who are overpriced, some who are underpriced in ADP, along with veterans who are undervalued in our eyes, and some of our favorite stacks to draft, all whilst answering any of your questions live here on Twitch. But first, Andrew, before we get into that, we drafted a bunch of teams together last year. We're not rich yet, as far as I'm aware. Any big takeaways from the 2024 best ball season before we dive into 2025?
Well, Tom, let's give ourselves some credit here. I believe that you just moved into a new house, correct? Like you purchased a new house. I also just bought my first house with my wife, so we're not doing too bad. I don't think
it could be worse.
It could be worse, and we were right about Jamar Chase being wide receiver 1. So
yes, very right about that.
We did that on some of the shows, so we don't need to get into everything. But Jamar Chase was a big hit last year, and I think one of the lessons that I learned is that you can't just copy and paste what happened the year before. I think that's probably the biggest mistake that you can make. And I know that's what we pointed out when we talked about Jamar Chase. And, well, CeeDee Lamb was going ahead of him. Tyreek Hill was sometimes going ahead of him. McCaffrey was the RB1 in a lot of the drafts. But that was just the top 3 picks from the previous year that were the best options. So I think that acknowledging that, hey, it's a brand new season. Yes, what happened last year matters to an extent, but it's just not a copy and paste type of scenario. So let's use that information to make the best decisions moving forward and expect, hey, the winners from last year probably aren't going to be the same winners this year. So let's try to find those guys. Don't chase Saquon Barkley from last year. Find this year's Saquon Barkley. It's kind of like the big point I'm trying to make. So although I haven't found this year's Jamar Chase quite yet, I still have him wide receiver 1. I'm not really sure if I want to back off that quite yet. Like Saquon Barkley for me, like he's not my RB1 this year. Like I didn't have enough. Again, didn't fade him last year to like oblivion, but didn't have enough of him, of course. And the other thing too is, yes, and I think you pointed this out on the sheet, the veteran running backs really bounced back big last year, but it was accompanied by a very weak rookie running back class. And this year is totally different. Like this rookie running back class is absolutely stacked. And you saw it how the veteran running backs didn't get paid that much in free agency. So where 0RB basically went to die last year, I think that it's more in play than ever this year because of the young bucks we have hitting the league this year.
Yeah, I absolutely love those points. And if we are talking your language and you want more of this, more fantasy football content, more best ball content, hit the subscribe, and it's free through Amazon Prime. And we are going to start on our first topic of the night, the overpriced, underpriced rookies to target fade. Andrew, I'm going to start us off on this one. And it's Tyler Warren. Like, Tyler Warren was somebody who got really impressive draft capital. Yes, he wasn't the tight end 1 in the draft. He was behind Colston Loveland, who was actually my rookie tight end 1 all along. But I just really struggle with Warren because mainly Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones. Like, I could look at an awful lot of stuff. I could talk about how Warren was a slow starter in college. Only had like 50 receptions in his first 3 years. But it just comes down to the fact that the Colts, they have 2 inaccurate quarterbacks. We're going to see some ping-ponging back and forth between Jones and Anthony Richardson, I think, this year. And I still like Josh Downs. Like, we were both quite high on Josh. Well, I think I was high on Josh Downs last year, and you were higher on Michael Pittman. But I think that those are guys who can work the intermediate area of the field as well. And that's going to make it harder for Tyler Warren to get out there and see huge value. Like, when it comes to drafting Tyler Warren, he's not going overly high at the minute. He is the tight end 12 vote in ADP with an ADP of 124 on Underdog. Are you buying at that price, or do you think that there are good reasons to be wary of him?
I agree with you that I think that he is overvalued here. Not every rookie tight end hits. Not every rookie tight end is of the Brock Bowers-esque. So I would be careful to just copy and paste what we saw from Bowers and expect guys like Colston Loveland, guys like Tyler Warren to just hit it from the get-go, especially given the circumstances that you laid out. There's a lot of target competition in Indianapolis. There's a lot of question marks about the quarterback play. And Tyler Warren, yeah, he was also my tight end too in this class. You pointed out really only 1 year of surefire production. And what was the issue with him the other seasons at Penn State? Well, he was playing behind other NFL tight ends, NFL talented players. Well, there's a lot of NFL target earners on the Colts. Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, even Adonai Mitchell, Alec Pierce. Like, it's funny. Imagine putting a good quarterback into this offense. It would be so excited for that quarterback to just put up bonkers numbers. But now you have Tyler Warren. Yes, he should be the tight end one. That's not the hurdle he has to get over. But there are so many other red flags in his profile. And I think, too, the range that he's going in as this middle tier tight end, this is usually the worst range to draft tight ends.
Yeah.
Because they're viewed as better than the quote unquote late round tight ends, but they're realistically closer to those guys than the ones of the elite, the guys that are going in the single digit rounds where you can see the path for upside. What's the upside for Tyler? Is he going to lead the team in targets?
Well, this area of the draft, like you look back at it and the kind of the fringe tight end ones for me, these are the guys who are going to be touchdown dependent. Like you go back last year and it was guys like Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet in this range. And when those guys weren't getting touchdowns, they just didn't command enough volume. And yes, that was last year's ADP. And that doesn't mean necessarily that this year we're going to see Tyler Warren fall victim to the same circumstances. But I just can't believe that Tyler Warren is going to go out there and see 80 targets this year. Even that feels like it would be a massive success for him, even if he saw, I'd be surprised if he ends up with much more than 50 receptions. But Andrew, let's move away from my take and go to your first overpriced rookie.
Yeah, so I tried to pick guys that are really expensive because that's kind of how you land on players that are overpriced. And for me, it's Omarion Hampton, running back for the Los Angeles Chargers from UNC, drafted in the first round by the Chargers. And I just don't think that we're giving enough credit for Najee Harris still being part of this backfield, at least in the temporary plans for the Chargers. We know Greg Roman loves to run the ball. I don't think it's okay. Omarion Hampton's going to get 350 carries his first year in the NFL, especially when you have a player like Najee Harris, who, look, I understand that he's not the flashiest running back, but the thing that he is very dependable. He's the only active player in the NFL to have at least 1,000 rushing yards each of the last 4 seasons. He has been super reliable. He started and played, or he's played in all 71 games that he's been eligible to play in during his career in Pittsburgh. And I know I talked about at the top how the veteran running backs didn't generate a lot of buzz in free agency this year. Well, the guy who got paid the most was Najee Harris. So even though relative to the other running backs, he was the most sought after running back on the market. And again, we had this epiphany, Tom, on last year's show where we talked about J.K. Dobbins, right? And I don't remember how we kind of got into the topic, but it was like, man, like J.K. Dobbins, like I know they didn't pay him enough money, but I just don't care. Like I think he can be the best running back. I don't think the Chargers really care how much money they're paying Najee Harris. Like if he's out there, he's effective, he's picking up first downs, then he's going to play. And to the point with J.K. Dobbins, I don't think it's a non-zero chance that he returns to the Chargers. He's generating no buzz anywhere elsewhere. He has a connection with Greg Roman, and the Chargers, why not bring him back? He was good for them when he was healthy. And this way, hey, he's an extra running back that they have, where last year it was the Gus Edwards show. It was Vidal. Like they had so many injuries that what if they bring in a third running back? So I do think that Hampton obviously has upside from a case. So he takes over the backfield during those playoff weeks. He's spiking, and that's when you want him. But at the same time, there's a lot of running backs that could spike that are going way after Omarion Hampton. So I just have some concerns about that. And I think if Dobbins ends up signing, well, I think Hampton's price is going to go down. Like that's the other big thing too.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about it from a price perspective, the fact that Omarion Hampton is going around pick 44 on underdog right now, while Najee Harris goes at pick 111, almost 70 picks difference between them feels too much. Like if Najee Harris was going around pick 90, I'd still be okay with it. I think that's kind of fine. I mean, yes, we're not talking about Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery like last year. And, perhaps there's that level of outcomes within their range, and maybe it's only a small percentage, but I still think that this is a team which we're going to see a lot of good running from. One of the areas where I think if Hampton is going to separate himself and pay off that cost at pick 44, he has to do it in the receiving game. And that's not something that we necessarily saw huge amounts from him in North Carolina. Like, there was a lot of scheme touches, a lot of screens, bits like that. Yeah, he kind of got over the 29 receptions mark in both the last 2 years. But it never really felt like it was like that, just, like some of the running backs who just absolute pass catches to the core. I'm not sure I ever felt completely that with Omarion Hampton. So yeah, I definitely get that. And in the spirit of keeping things a little bit higher up the ADP board than Tyler Warren, who I called overpriced at, tight end 12, let's go to RJ Harvey, who has an ADP at 55.8 currently on Underdog. Like, I love RJ Harvey. I'd planned on drafting plenty of RJ Harvey this year, but it feels a lot harder for me to do now that you're talking about taking him very high up in drafts. Like, RJ Harvey has landed on a team which last year was deeply entrenched with a committee in the Broncos, and everybody's rushing to say RJ Harvey is Sean Payton's weapon. We heard that phrase so many times before the draft. Sean Payton wants a weapon. Sean Payton wants a weapon. And now we've got RJ Harvey going just a couple of picks behind Joe Mixon, who has very little competition with the Texans, going right around the same range as Chuba Hubbard, who again could have a very clear path in Carolina, and 5 picks ahead of Kenneth Walker, who, although Zach Charbonnet continues to flash at times, it still feels like Kenneth Walker's backfield in a Seahawks team that could be more run-heavy this year. So whilst I love RJ Harvey, whilst I think that the Broncos have got a good offensive line, I want to generally be buying into what the Broncos are doing. I'm just finding him a hard click through the sort of 60 or so drafts that I've done so far.
Yeah, it's really the price that it's just hard to wrap your mind around, because are we going to do the Sean Payton shenanigans? It's going to be, I mean, I guess in best
Troy
ball,
Franklin, Marvin Mims. Oh yeah, and you can say it's fine in best ball, but it's not. I drafted those players in their rookie seasons, and those were dead picks for large parts of the season, and they were probably cheaper than we're paying for RJ Harvey right now.
Yeah, the issue that I try to think about here is, what if, okay, so let's say like Bucky Irving, right, last year, an absolute smash at the end of the season, and obviously would end up being a best ball winner because of everything that kind of played out. But imagine if you just drafted him in the 4th round of last year, and you were just kind of taking, I mean, when he wasn't really doing anything in the beginning of the season, it would feel kind of weird that you would take him so early. So I have concerns about Harvey to start out of the gates, and I don't think that we're going to really get any clear coach speak from Sean Payton about RJ Harvey and his role. Now, I will say, in comparison to some of the other running backs that I guess maybe pre-draft, I know I can't speak for, or I speak for myself, I wasn't high enough on RJ Harvey, but I know a lot of, like, Deebo obviously loves RJ Harvey, so it wasn't a surprise to him necessarily that they took him that highly. So seeing him closer to like the TreVeyon Hendersons, I don't think is as shocking, just because, hey, well, they both went in the 2nd round. It's not that stark, but to get up to this level for an older prospect who, again, has pass pro issues, that's another big thing. It's like, okay, if he's struggling with pass protection, is he on the field? Is he catching passes out of the backfield? Is it Marvin Mims catching passes out of the backfield? So long story short, if there's a really easy way to see a pick just burning to flames, I think it's okay to step back and be like, all right, this is probably a player that's overpriced. And I think RJ Harvey's going to, and I don't think it's going to stop. Like, that's the other thing too. Like, when is it going to stop going up and up and up?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I'm very much with you. Like, it's a difficult one, and because I find RJ Harvey such an exciting player, I will have exposure to him. I just don't feel comfortable about it enough that every time I can do it without clicking, I'm looking at the structure of my team, I'm looking at the correlations and bits like that. And sometimes I'm looking for an excuse not to click him. But Andrew, let's get one more overpriced rookie running back out of your selections, then we'll move on to some underpriced players.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Quinshon Judkins for the Cleveland Browns. And this is a pick that I was really excited when they first made it. And then ever since that, I've thought more about the Cleveland Browns and their situation and what Judkins does effectively. as a more traditional early down running back. Now they've talked about him using him in the passing game, not something that he did a lot at the college level. So I think that it is a real projection. And do I want the 2-down running back on the Cleveland Browns? And that's something that I'm trying to be like, do I want that guy on my team? Like, is this going to be the guy that's going to have this monster best ball run in the playoffs because the Cleveland Browns are going to be some juggernaut offense? I maybe Joe Flacco, we'll see. But if anything, you're more likely to see Joe Flacco not in the conversation during the fantasy playoffs because they have all these young quarterbacks that like, hey, let's have Dylan Gabriel a chance. Let's give Shadur Sanders a chance. And then you don't know what's going to happen. At least with Flacco, you're like, hey, there's going to be 45 dropbacks and you're going to feel good that someone's going to get fantasy production. So for me, Judkins can be a rookie running back that, again, I don't want to fade a lot of these rookie running backs, but because you can only get so many in each draft, like if it's TreVeyon versus RJ Harvey, I'm going to go with TreVeyon. Like that's the guy I want. And if it's Kaleb Johnson versus Quinshon Judkins, then I'm just going to take the guy that looks like he could be the next Derrick Henry in an Arthur Smith offense and hope that Aaron Rodgers finally signs with the Steelers. So again, you can't draft every single rookie running back in one draft. So if I have to pick and choose, I'm going to take Johnson over Judkins and Henderson over Harvey. And their ADPs are pretty in the same range where you're going to probably have to make that decision more often than not. So I'm going to fade, hot take, Tom, I'm going to fade the 2025 Cleveland Browns offense.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And the Ravens fan within me finds it a little easy. Like I had plenty of Jerome Ford last year. And I think that, there will be some points like Judkins just feels like a player. If I'm drafting him at pick 72, I need to feel really assured about how I'm getting that early season production. And maybe by the end of the season, things start to pick up and it's fine. And maybe they just go ground control and defense all the way through the season. I guess we will see on that. But just want to pick up on Black Raptor's comment in the chat. Hey, never done best ball before. Is there a chance you could explain what it is at a very simple level? Best ball, the best form of fantasy football, in my opinion. It takes all the roster decisions out of the game once you get past the draft. Each week, the site that you're playing it through, they automatically choose you the best possible starting lineup from the roster that you've drafted. Typically, you draft 18 to 20 players. And then it just comes down to strategy, really. So you're drafting in a microcosm of time. You're up against the people around you. And it's just set it and forget it football. The ability to get through a draft in 30, 40 minutes, even quicker if you're playing on fast draft, which I know we're going to cover at points. We're going to talk about all these different sites throughout the summer. Each week we'll be here for Best Ball live streams on Twitch. And of course, you can watch myself and Andrew talk about this. We are both putting in a lot of work to the Fantasy Pros Best Ball Guide now, which will be up very soon. Lots going live day after day. And like I say, we'll be here on twitch.tv/Fantasy Pros, drafting on a whole host of sites, where it's Underdog, DraftKings, FFPC, Drafters. Myself and Andrew, we like to draft on them all, and we're always happy to talk about the strategy. We're always happy to talk about why certain players go higher in best ball than they would in normal fantasy leagues and much more. But Andrew, let's hit on some underpriced players quickly in best ball, some underpriced rookie players. So the first one who I put down was Travis Hunter. And this is perhaps a little bit spicy because this is a wide receiver who's going at the 42nd pick overall. And he is going as the wide receiver 22. So this isn't a cheap price for him. But at the same time, this isn't like Marvin Harrison last year, where Marvin Harrison's price was so expensive at the end of round one that if he failed, it was a really detrimental cost to your roster. Now you're talking about taking Travis Hunter with your third, fourth pick or so. And so far, all the pictures I've seen of Travis Hunter out of Jags camp are him playing wide receiver. The word is that they want him to play wide receiver. And if we're looking at a guy who is as good on paper in the NFL as he was in college, I truly believe that come the back end of a season that he could have such upside that I want to be drafting him on my team. So I wouldn't draft him past pick 30, but for me, anywhere between pick 30 and 40, I'm quite happy drafting him.
Yeah, man, the Travis Hunter wars are going to go all summer long. Try to figure out where,
be fully armed.
try to figure out what to do with him. So I think I'm definitely more on the bearish side of things. I'm gonna pour cold water on the Travis Hunter, and this is how I thought about him kind of coming into the year. I knew there was going to be a ton of question marks about, is he going to be on defense? Like, what's the splits going to be like? And to the point you made about, I think that he is one of these players in best ball that you probably can't just like blindly fade entirely because of his insane range of outcomes. But to your point about what he could do in the playoffs, I mean, well, let's say the Jacksonville Jaguars have a bunch of injuries on defense and he just plays defense in the fantasy playoffs. And then he's a total zero, right? So, I mean, he is like the epitome of better in best ball. Like Travis Hunter is like, he should be the poster boy for this show, because trying to figure out his weekly usage when we don't even know, Jacksonville's not going to tell us. We're not going to get any preseason usage about him because because they're coming from the Rams. So they're never going to give us about, oh, he's playing in the slot, he's doing this, he's doing that. So again, he's such an exciting player. And that's part of the fun of best ball is you get to draft players that are fun, that maybe when they score the 80-yard touchdown, I didn't start in my lineup. Oh, but I have in my best ball team. And we know Travis Hunter has that in his range of outcomes. But I did feel that entering the year, if he ended up being really expensive, which I think that still round 3-4 is still pretty pricey for a guy like Travis Hunter. Again, if he's still the number 2 on his offense, attached to Trevor Lawrence, who technically hasn't been he's not Matthew Stafford in terms of, I just create fantasy wide receiver ones. Mac Jones was the guy that fueled Brian Thomas Jr. last year. So I have some reservations about that. And I have reservations about his workload and him he's not a big guy. Like, he's a smaller receiver, more slender build. And is he going to last all the way to the playoffs if he's playing on both sides of the ball? So I felt like he was a player that if people were going to be out on him, that, this is an easy buy. But the fact that it seems like the fantasy market, at least the best ball market, is probably more bullish, to your point, Tom, like you are, that I think that I'll just like tip my cap. Hey, you guys were right about Travis Hunter. I was wrong. But I think this one I'm going to be sitting out on the sidelines.
Yeah, and I fully understand the arguments against it. To your point, if the Jags end up with loads of injuries on defense, and maybe he does end up playing more over there, but also then they end up in more shootouts, and then they end up putting more points up. So I'll be very happy either way. Let's go to your first underpriced player, Andrew.
So I did mention Kaleb Johnson. I just wanted to talk about him. I think he's one of my favorite rookie running backs, but by far my favorite rookie running back, just when you're considering the price, is Bashal Tutin from Virginia Tech, talking about the Jaguars. Look, he is the cheapest part of this backfield that you can get. He's a player that was hand selected by the new regime. And I mean, he went to the top of round 4. If he was a round 3, it's so crazy how we think that it's such a big difference between the end of round 3 and round 4 when it was basically no picks in between, but you just get stuck with that round 4 draft capital, day 3. It's just like, disgusting. No commitment whatsoever. But I just think Bashal Tutin, this guy can ball out. I think that he last year showed how effective he is creating yards after contact. And a lot of people don't always talk about this, but he battled through an ankle injury last year. So those that have kind of poked holes in his game about last year and what he put on tape, I don't think we even saw the full version of Bashal Tutin at all last year. I think that he was playing through an injury, fully healthy. I think that his price is going to continue to go up. I don't know what the long-term commitment is to Travis Etienne is only under contract for the rest of the season, but does he get dealt? Does he get traded? Is Trevor Lawrence the only guy in the building that's like, hey, you got to keep Travis around because we went to Clemson together? Like, is that the only guy that they're keeping him around for? And then Tank Bigsby. I mean, it's year 3 of fading Tank Bigsby. So
yeah, I think like your point on Etienne, they don't seem particularly enamored with him. It'd be very easy to see him moving on at some point, and obviously there's no clamor for it now because all the teams are looking at the rookies that we just drafted. But when I look at Tutin and I look back at the 40-yard dash time of 4.32, that in itself is enough for me to be interested, because we want players who can break a play in one play. That turns the game quicker, and that makes life so much better for fantasy when you spin the game on its head, you score points, and I think that Tutin is going to see enough work this year to be very useful. I've got one player left in my underpriced rookies who I'm going to hit on. It is Jayden Higgins of the Texans, and like for me, this was one of those situations where Higgins just felt like the perfect player in the perfect landing spot. And I know that some people are concerned about Christian Kirk, but like the Texans, there was a procedural element to making that trade. When they did it, they immediately opened up salary cap space by triggering a bonus within Kirk's contract, which then, so basically they gave up a pick swap in the 6th round to get Christian Kirk. And then all of a sudden opened up like $4 million of cap space. There was benefits to them beyond that for giving up barely anything. And Higgins, like, I just really like him. You're talking about a guy who's 6'4", 214 pounds. We've had so many undersized wide receivers over the last few years. And yes, there's the comparisons to Nico Collins and how he plays, and the idea that it could be tricky for Higgins to coexist against Nico Collins. I just don't see that. I see the Texans as a team who are going to have to pass the ball heavily this year because their offensive line is woeful. And I just think that Higgins could be a really good value going at pick 98 currently.
So I push back on Hunter. I am not pushing back anything on Jayden Higgins. We talked about this on an earlier show we did on the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast, talking about potential wide receiver ones, guys that you can get super late dart throws. Jayden Higgins is such an easy pick to make. I can't believe he's still going this late. And Tom, how early were we drafting all these Texans wide receivers last year? We had 3 guys inside the top 5 rounds, and now it's Nico basically in round 1, round 2, and then we don't want anybody else. It's still CJ Stroud. It's still the same quarterback, and I get the offensive line had issues. Again, I don't think it'd be worse than it was last year. I know that they've revamped it. They don't have the best personnel, but just from a culture building standpoint, they're like, hey, like we got to get tougher up front. So hopefully just the new players that they've brought in. And something that I keep remembering about Higgins was, as something I like to do, like the wager, I was wagering on the NFL draft, and I remember opening up one of the sports books and finding that they had Jayden Higgins, or they had odds for the Texans picking, I think it was like the 33rd overall pick or 34th overall pick. And Jayden Higgins was like plastered in there at like minus 500. I'm like, wait, is this going to happen? And then they just took him. So clearly this was their guy that they were targeting. And I think that means a lot. And attaching yourself to CJ Stroud long-term in Dynasty is great. And especially this year. So I'm trying to not overweight how Stroud disappointed last year and just scoop up the value, as we'll talk about when we talk about some of these team stacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's move on to some other undervalued players, but let's move away from the rookies for a moment and talk about some of the players that we just currently see as undervalued based on their ADP. Andrew, I'm going to let you go first on this section because I've got one player who I keep getting pushback on when I mention him as being a value, but I'm going to let you go first and see how spicy your players are here.
Yeah, so I will start with Evan Ingram. That's kind of the guy that I'm planting my flag on as a tight end that I want to target. We talked about the Denver Broncos when it comes to RJ Harvey. They've brought in a lot of new pieces this year. So it's not just RJ Harvey. They're bringing in Evan Ingram as the tight end 1 in this offense. They were rumored to draft a tight end. They did not really do that. I think they drafted somebody late, but Evan Ingram looks like he's going to be the guy. And it's funny, the minute that he signed with Sean Payton and the Broncos, he tweets out the Joker GIF. And I'm just like, I'm convinced, man. Like they're going to use this guy in a really unique way. And Evan Ingram, again, I can't guarantee he's going to stay healthy. Nobody can. We don't know what's going to happen injury-wise. But when Evan Ingram is healthy, he has been a guy that's been a PPR machine, racking up receptions. Even last year, he averaged over 5 catches per game in 9 games played. He was still tight end 16 in points per game. And that was after a year where he was essentially a top 5 tight end in full PPR. Every time he's landed with a new team, so his first year with the Giants, he was a top 6 tight end. First year with the Jaguars, he was a top 6 tight end. And I think that if they're going to try to improve this offense with Bo Nix in year 2, well, let's give him another check down option in Evan Ingram. Because I think that's where Bo Nix struggled the most his rookie year, was under pressure, trying to find an outlet. Yeah, they have Cortland Sutton, but besides that, it was really a lot of unproven guys, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin. So I think Evan Ingram can really kind of settle in as Bo Nix's number 1 check down security blanket. I think he's going to rack up a lot of receptions. And then if he just gets any type of red zone usage, which is something that has been non-existent with him in Jacksonville, then I think you could see him make a lot of noise in half PPR.
Yeah, I think he really is going to have to make noise in the touchdown department to kind of pay off. And the reason I'm a bit more hesitant on Evan Ingram is I just find him such a difficult player to get on board with because the yards after the catch just isn't there. And it was really transparent last year that it just wasn't. It was, 13.5 yards after the catch per game played, which ranked 28th among tight ends. This was well behind guys like Dallas Goedert, Austin Hooper, Brenton Strange, who is now replacing him in Jacksonville. Brenton Strange averaged 1.5 more yards per catch after the catch per game played. And I just don't see the kind of dynamic player that I think people are hoping that he might be with Sean Payton. I think that there's definitely a path to being worthwhile in fantasy, and I think that he can be a good player. And he's going at pick 112 at the minute, so it's not like you're having to pay a huge price for him. Like when you look at the other tight ends who are going around that range, it is Tyler Warren, who I mentioned earlier, Colston Loveland. He's going 6 picks behind Mark Andrews. To me, as a Ravens fan, I find that one a lot easier to click. But Evan Ingram's going 12 picks behind Travis Kelce, and then 16 picks behind Jonnu Smith. Like those are guys who I feel like have shown a little more in different ways over the last couple of years. And even though Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce on the older side as well, Mark Andrews is younger than Evan Ingram by a year. Travis Kelce is obviously older by several years. But let's stick with the tight ends and move over to my favorite underpriced player. And it's Sam LaPorta, who goes at pick 68. And I think that is still a little bit too cheap. Currently, in the way the tight end landscape is playing out, you've got Brock Bowers and Trey McBride who go within the first 2 rounds. And then there's just a complete drop off till George Kittle kind of going around pick 50. And in my opinion, the overreaction on Sam LaPorta is too much. Yes, Sam LaPorta was incredibly disappointing last season, but it was mainly at the beginning of the season. You go back and look, and from week 8 onwards, Sam LaPorta was the tight end 7. Over that course, he was averaging 11.5 PPR points per game, 13.2 full PPR points per game. He had 6 touchdowns from week 8 onwards, was averaging 48 yards per game. Yes, the Lions weren't playing to him in quite the same way as they were before, but the Lions defense had improved. Like they weren't so reliant on pass heavy stuff, but it seemed like as the season went on, they figured things out. And like, I want to draft Sam LaPorta in every draft I'm in at if I'm getting him in anywhere between pick 60 to 70.
To your point about LaPorta, again, I think you can probably understand, coming off a not so great year based on expectations and the fact that, target competition is always something that you talk about with the Detroit Lions. But one thing that I want to bring up, and I think we talked about this on the show last year, was talking about not just the injuries for certain players, but the team level injuries. And last year, the Lions offense stayed relatively healthy for the most part. So you didn't really see guys like Jameson Williams miss games because of suspension. Like he didn't really miss games because of injury. LaPorta, I know, played through some injuries, but Amon-Ra St. Brown was healthy for the majority of the season. That's not usually something that happens year over year. So if one of these big guys imagine if Amon-Ra St. Brown missed like a month of the season, like how like you would see, so it either LaPorta or Jameson Williams, like one of these guys would just completely skyrocket in terms of their production. And I think that at the tight end position, he's still the same talent as he was when the market was drafting him so highly last year. I couldn't get around just the target competition last year, but it's just his price is adjusted correctly now. Like I don't think he's an amazing value like you do, but I'm much more open to picking him, especially in the best ball format where we're talking about best ball versus redraft. Something to keep in mind with tight ends is I think that you should be more open to drafting an elite tight end because you don't have the waiver. That's the other big difference. There's no waiver wire in best ball drafts. So you can't just pick up Jonnu Smith off the waiver wire or whoever's breaking out that week. Now, most of these drafts go long enough where you could end up drafting a guy like Jonnu Smith like later in your drafts, but sometimes these tight ends, like they don't get picked. Like Tucker Kraft, someone that we talked about a lot on the show last year too. A lot of people were just drafting Luke Musgrave and he wasn't being drafted. So that's something to keep in mind, that I think that prioritizing a tight end that can be a top scorer is worth taking the risk, even though they have an elevated injury risk just because of the position they play. So LaPorta at this new price, with a factor of if the Lions don't have as much health luck this year between St. Brown and Jameson Williams. Again, Jameson Williams, like, guy's still bonehead. I think he's really talented, but that guy still doesn't seem to have everything screwed on right, where he continues to miss games because he makes dumb decisions. Whereas LaPorta, he's good to go. So I do like you bringing him up.
Yeah, I just think like when tight ends hit in a big way, it so consistently helps you to separate, particularly in best ball. And Sam LaPorta is probably one of maybe 6 guys who I would say I have confidence in that he's going to have 2 or more 20-plus point games throughout this season. Let's go across to another one of your other undervalued upside players. Who have you got for us, Andrew?
I'm going with Justin Fields, quarterback for the New York Jets. So this is something that I've been trying to wrap my mind around when it comes to best ball quarterbacks is I really want more mobile quarterbacks in best ball, because what happens in redraft is you start a mobile quarterback and then he doesn't run for one game and you're pulling your hair out trying to figure out, what do I do with this guy? Because when he's just passing, he's not scoring any points. Best ball, there's no sweat. There's no worry about that, because you're just taking the peaks from these mobile quarterbacks. I think that's what you're going to get from Justin Fields. He's going outside the top 100 overall picks, but everything that he's shown us when he's played, this guy's consistently averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. He's going to run the ball. He has to use his legs, or else he's not going to be the starting quarterback for the New York Jets. Again, the concern is, if he plays so horribly as a passer, is he there during the playoff weeks? That's the main concern, I think, with drafting Justin Fields. But if he's playing well enough, it's Tyrod Taylor that's behind him. I don't think the Jets are necessarily, we got to get this young player in. It's not that type of situation. So he would have to bust in a pretty big way to, I think, just lose the job outright, and you don't have him in the playoff weeks. But I'm just betting on, hey, I think he'd be at least a big part of getting me there, while I'm pairing him with another quarterback. And where you get him outside the top 100, I feel like it's not that big of a price to pay for his weekly upside is a top 8 quarterback. I have no doubt in my mind that he can be a top 8 scorer every single week, but it's just a matter of kind of capturing that volatility, where if his passing goes down or the game script works in a way that the Jets aren't forced to use his legs in a particular matchup.
Yeah, so I mean, you touched on it. He's going outside the top 100, going at pick 104 currently on Underdog, and he is for QB 10, which feels appropriately priced for me. As you say, it's like we're talking about a guy who is going to rush plenty. We know that things were a little bit up and down in Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh didn't really seem to ever be on board with the Justin Field experiment, really. I think that there's some definite scope for Justin Fields to be more settled around the Jets, who seem to really like him. And when you come back to Justin Fields, what always really stands out is that he's one of the few guys out there who can give you multiple rushing touchdowns within a game. We saw that, in 2 games last year. And he had career bests in completion rate and interception rate last year. He only had a disappointing 5 touchdowns in those 6 games, but he was rushing the ball in, and I'm willing to pay for that. I think the vibes are going to be good between him and Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson knows what he's getting into. So yeah, I'm completely on board with Justin Fields. I think it's going to be a fun year for him, and I'm drafting plenty of him. Just want to shout out quickly, Out of Space, Cortland Sutton going a little too late, in my opinion. Been scooping up often. Yeah, really like that shout, and really appreciate Out of Space subbing to the channel as well. Make sure you're doing so. And also, Jake's Not Good. You guys rock. If you haven't already, make sure that you do hit the subscribe button. It is free with Amazon Prime, and we've got so much fantasy football content coming your way, including this best ball show each and every week. I've got one more running back who I want to kind of hit on in this range, and it's a guy we talked about a lot last year, Andrew. Brian Robinson Jr., going pick 88. And look, we filled our bags heavily. We did a high-stakes redraft team, which we had Brian Robinson on, and we thought all our problems were solved. That Brian Robinson was going to be excellent. He was going to get a huge opportunity, that the Jayden Daniels effect would open things up for him. And it did to an effect. And we thought that Austin Eckler would be, struggling to provide the kind of like competition for Brian Robinson that some people thought he might. And we saw that, Austin Eckler missed multiple games through the year. And there were times where Brian Robinson really could have capitalized to a better tune than he perhaps did. What he struggled with really was just grasping that opportunity. But here we are again, pick 88 overall. And I just look where Brian Robinson's going. He's going just ahead of Isaiah Pacheco. That's an easy click for me. Just ahead of Cam Scatterbo. A few picks behind DeAndre Swift, who, despite what the Bears are saying, I'm still not sure they actually like him. And while Brian Robinson didn't do anything to earn a massive increase in role or anything like that, the Commanders completely ignored the running back position. And I just think that there's a world where Brian Robinson gets some positive touchdown regression this year and ends up paying off his cost quite handsomely, because year after year, we do see running back winners come from this area of the draft. Are you coming back to the well on Brian Robinson, or has he hurt you one too many times?
See, I don't know, because from what I remember most of the time from him last year was he was a pretty good success. I know that things fizzled out, kind of like you pointed out, towards the end of the year, but he was dealing with some injuries. I mean, that whole backfield got battered by injuries. And I know that he also had some fumble security issues, but I think that Brian Robinson, I think that he's a really good price here.
Yeah, so to put, he played 13 games last year. In 9 of them, he was a top 24 running back in PPR. He just never once hit the top PPR on an individual week. So he was very much averaging that kind of like 14, 15 points in PPR rather than giving you those blow up weeks. But I think that Brian Robinson, because he's not giving you those ceiling performances, that people are a little bit out on him. Now, we talked at the top of the show how this could be an excellent year for zero RB because you've got the influx of rookies. If you're looking for somebody to pair with some of these rookie dart throws, then I think Brian Robinson is going to give you solid production early on in the season. And if you've got a running back room of 6 to 7 running backs on a roster, and Brian Robinson is one of those guys that's just going to carry you towards the back end of the season when the rookies start taking over on different rosters, then perhaps that can work out nicely.
Yeah, I think that's a really good pull, Tom, when you talk about Brian Robinson. And again, thinking about who can be this year's version. I know that everyone wants to chase who's this year's Bucky Irving. We do it for the clicks, of course, because that's what everyone wants to know. But think about who could be this year's Chuba Hubbard, right? Kind of like a veteran running back. He's penciled in as the starter, but we're all kind of just, oh, who's going to replace him? Like, I mean, I like Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt, like, but I acknowledge he's like a 7th round pick. So I'm trying to temper expectations. I think he could be a fun guy if he gets an opportunity, but Brian Robinson would really have to falter in a big way for them to decide, okay, we're going to the 7th round rookie draft pick to be our starting running back. I think that we've seen the sales or the ship sail with Austin Eckler. Like he's dealt with a lot of injuries as well. And Brian Robinson, no, he's not the most dynamic running back that there's ever been in the NFL, but he's still a Alabama pedigree running back that gets the job done more often than not. And playing attached to Jayden Daniels, like you said, if he hits on that positive touchdown regression, well, okay, now he is getting that in the top of my lineup, the top 10 score because he's getting those touchdowns. And I mean, we're excited about this Commanders offense, but Jayden Daniels entering year 2.
Yeah.
Anyone that's going to fight off the sophomore slump is Jayden Daniels. So getting pieces of this offense, especially at this price, makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and I'm not concerned that like Deebo Samuel's going to come in there and take a bunch of rushing work, because if there's one thing we've seen from Deebo Samuel over the last couple of years, it looks like adding on huge amounts of rushing production to him isn't necessarily what he needs. So, yeah, very, very much on board with that. DJ saying the pros on Twitch finally able to chop it up and catch one of these. Well, we will be here at this time throughout this offseason talking best ball. And if best ball is the language that you want, then the 2025 Best Ball Draft Kit is live over at fantasypros.com/best ball. Myself and Andrew are absolutely cramming articles into there as much as we can. I submitted 2 myself this afternoon, and there's so much stuff that's going to help you crush. It is your one-stop shop for rankings, stacks, ADP trends, rookie breakdowns, roster construction strategy. That's my favorite part to write. I love getting into the nuances of roster construction strategy. And it also includes exclusive strategy content for Fast Draft, a new best ball app where drafts take just 5 minutes and you can win real money. Andrew, I know you've been doing loads of those. And if people want to join you on there, download Fast Draft and use code FANTASYPROS when signing up to get your first deposit matched up to $50. That's up to 10 drafts, all for free. We got one more segment we're going to go to, and of course, if you've got any questions, feel free to fire them to us as we get to this final kind of chunk of the show. Andrew, who's your favorite stack to draft right now?
It's Patriots. It's got to be my homerism. I love the Patriots. That's who I want to stack because they're super cheap. Number one, they're super cheap, and they feature my
for the second year in a row.
For the second year in a row, but much more optimistic about this working out and as opposed to last year. I like them from a betting standpoint. They have the second easiest schedule in the NFL. I think that Drake Maye showed as a rookie in a terrible situation everything that you want to see from a future top fantasy scorer. He was throwing touchdowns despite not having weapons. He was rushing. He was using his legs. So although the supporting cast is still a work in progress, I'd hardly say that this Patriots offense is who's stopping this offense status yet. Although I do like those graphics for sure. I just think that this is a really good spot to buy the Patriots improving heading into this year. So I think that they're again, TreVeyon Henderson, I believe, is the most expensive guy. And I know that he's been kind of getting steamed up with reports coming out about how the Patriots were shopping that pick, but they were like, no, we want to be defined. We want to pick our guy. And I think Henderson specifically, again, like him versus RJ Harvey, which that might come down to a decision as RJ Harvey's ADP continues to rise. TreVeyon Henderson is excellent in pass pro. There are no concerns about whether he can be a step in and be a 3-down back. Now, I don't think that he will play like every 3 downs, but the capabilities of keeping him fresh by using guys like Ramondre and Antonio Gibson sprinkling in. But I think he's going to capitalize on the high value touches. And that's the real big thing with him. He's explosive. He can rip off big plays. So even if he only touches the ball 8 to 10 times, well, it could be to a Tony Pollard level. Like that's who I comped him at coming out of Ohio State was Tony Pollard. And we knew how good Tony Pollard could be when he was a compliment to Zeke. And then when they gave him all the touches, he wasn't nearly as good. So I like TreVeyon Henderson in this offense. And then the receivers are all cheap. Diggs is cheap. Kyle Williams is a rookie receiver that I really like. He's also cheap. And then talking about tight ends, if Drake Maye hits with touchdowns, Hunter Henry is going to be a great pick because he's a red zone guy. Last year, he was top 10 in red zone targets. He caught 2 touchdowns and he had comical drops. I remember watching all those games. It was really bad. So Hunter Henry, I think, is the perfect guy to stack with Drake Maye as that second tight end because they're going to be heavily correlated because of those touchdowns. And when you're talking about underdog, I know we didn't talk about this when we mentioned the tight ends, but hitting on those touchdowns is so key in the half PPR scoring. Like finding those that score, and just the easiest way to do it is like, hey, who's your quarterback? Stack them with the tight end, and that should really help your correlation.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like you say, TreVeyon Henderson goes at pick 62, and then you've got Stefon Diggs at pick 77, and that is it in the top 120 when it comes to the Patriots. Hunter Henry all the way down at pick 170. That's practically free. He is the tight end 23, and I was really surprised when drafts got underway that he wasn't going slightly higher because there is excitement around the Drake Maye effect, and I think the Drake Maye can absolutely take a step forward. The wide receiver position feels very similar to last year. Like, look, I like Kyle Williams, but we all liked Jalen Polk last year, and we all thought that Jalen Polk could be a good player, and that one definitely did not age particularly well. I did not have him getting outscored by Kayshon Boutte last year. And to your point that the Patriots look primed to improve, I was reading an article on The Athletic today where their supermodel gives the Patriots a 47% chance to make the playoffs this year, which is only just behind the Chargers. Like, there are plenty of reasons, both analytically and non-analytically, why you can expect some kind of improvement from them. And I don't think that the division is as strong as it was a couple of years ago. Definitely not on paper. There are so many questions about the Dolphins defense, particularly if they end up trading Jalen Ramsey away, and all signs seem to point towards that being a June thing rather than actually around the draft where there was no motivation for them to do so. The Jets have been incredibly up and down year to year, and I think that the Patriots could be a really fun team. So I'm very much with you on that one. But from there, we talked about your team as your favorite team to stack, and I'm going to go over to my team, the Ravens, because we have got, 48 minutes into this show, and I have talked about the Ravens far too little. And, you know, I appreciate here on Fantasy Pros, you get a healthy dose of Ravens from myself and Worm. But when I look at Lamar going at pick 36, Zay Flowers, you can stack Zay Flowers with Lamar. It's a little tricky because of where their ADPs line up. One of them tends to be on the other side of the board. But if you're picking at the turn, I don't mind pulling one of them forward. But then after Zay Flowers, you're going all the way to pick 106 for Mark Andrews. Now, I know people have fairly strong feelings about Mark Andrews. This is a tight end who got 11 touchdowns last season. And while we have to admit that touchdowns can be variable year to year, can be tricky, cannot always be something that we want to bank on, Mark Andrews has so much history with Lamar Jackson. The two players came into the league at the same time. Like, there's so much of a bond between them that even with Isaiah Likely taking a step forward, I'm completely fine saying there's enough room for both of them. They added DeAndre Hopkins. That was the only notable player that they brought in this year. With Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews both on expiring contracts, they didn't see the need to draft anyone. Charlie Kohler also on an expiring contract, but that doesn't particularly matter. I think the Ravens are just completely comfortable with what they've got, and we know the kind of roles that they have. Zay Flowers is going to see the highest volume. Rashod Bateman has a good role, but it's not a role that you'd possibly want for redraft. And then both Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely are going to have spike weeks. And if I'm getting both those tight ends outside the top 105 picks, then I'm completely comfortable with it. The Ravens are going to face an improved division from at least the Bengals this year, I would imagine. But the Steelers, who knows? The Browns, who knows? But the Ravens have some really spicy games out of the division. Their first few weeks of the season open with games against the Bills, the Chiefs, the Lions, and I think that they're going to get teams off to a very strong start in best ball.
The Ravens are a team that I really like. Some of the late round values, like you talked about, like Isaiah Likely, like Rashod Bateman. We were doing the wide receiver one show, predicting the next wide receiver one, and there's going to be some fifth-year wide receiver that becomes a wide receiver one for the first time. Rashod Bateman, I don't know how it's going to happen, but he's got the quarterback, and he stayed healthy last year. So coming off a career year, Rashod Bateman, man, I think that he's probably one of the best picks that you can make in the double-digit rounds or outside the top 100, because talking about regression at the team level for injuries, the Ravens were one of the healthiest offenses last year. They're probably not going to be as healthy heading into 2025. So if guy like Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews misses time, well, Isaiah Likely, we've seen him be a tight end one when he gets the opportunity. Rashod Bateman, I don't think that it's really been a question of talent with Rashod Bateman. It's been health has been an issue and the ecosystem he's in. It's not like the Ravens are an offense that throw the ball 40 times a game. So he hasn't been allowed to do that. But a couple injuries here and there. We've already saw one of the Ravens safeties go down with an injury, Ardarius Stewart. So is the injury regression already coming to play? I don't know. But
I don't like this.
Hey, it could be good for fantasy. They may not win as many games as they did last year, but they still might score a lot of fantasy points.
Well, I mean, their defense was atrocious through the first half of the season. But yeah, I'm definitely with you on that one. I think that it makes a lot of sense. Let's go over to another of your picks. We've got a few minutes left here before we get out of here, but I want to hit on this team because the first one that you picked is a team that really were the tale of two halves of the season last year. Who is it, Andrew?
Carolina Panthers. Again, I'm looking for value here. They're one of the cheapest teams. So when I calculated the ADPs by the teams based on the top 7 players for each team, and the Carolina Panthers had the 5th lowest ADP when it comes to the team level. So they're cheap across the board. So again, they're cheap for a reason because there's obviously people are concerned about, the Saints are the bottom ADP because nobody wants the Saints. And that makes sense based on their current situation. But the Panthers, look, we saw Bryce Young be a quarterback that created fantasy success. The defense, they didn't even use their first pick on a defensive player in the draft. They drafted a wide receiver. They had one of the worst defenses in the NFL last year. And they were like, we're getting another wide receiver. So we love that for fantasy purposes. I think Tetairoa McMillan is vastly underrated as a redraft pick, as a best ball pick, even in fast draft. So Omarion Hampton goes ahead of him in fast draft. And I would rather have Tetairoa McMillan. I think he offers the same type of playoff upside that Omarion Hampton does. But week 1, he's facing the Jacksonville Jaguars. How many catches is he going to have over Travis Hunter playing defense on him? So I like the Panthers a decent amount here because they're all cheap and you can stack them easily. I think that Rico Dowdle is kind of an interesting prospect in terms of him working as more of a 1B to Chuba Hubbard's 1A in that backfield. And Bryce Young is, again, another quarterback that's free. But, hey, he showed last year during that final stretch, he was scoring fantasy points. So unless that defense really turns it around, I think the Carolina Panthers are going to be a fun team for fantasy football purposes. And that's kind of why I like stacking up at value.
Yeah, I mean, the Panthers, it's fair to point out that the Panthers, they didn't really get to put the iteration of the offense on the field that they wanted to last year. They wanted Jonathon Brooks out there at a certain point. They wanted Deontay Johnson out there. They wanted him to be that safety blanket for Bryce Young, and it kind of gets forgotten about. Young, as you kind of mentioned, he did come on down the stretch from week 13 onwards. He had 2 top 8 fantasy finishes. And in terms of the overall cheapness, you are paying up for Tet and you are paying up for Chuba Hubbard with top 60 picks on both of them. But then there's nobody for another 100 picks. When you get to pick 159 onwards, there's a glut of Carolina Panthers in Leggett, Young, Thielen, even Rico Dowdle, and then Jalen Coker later than that, and Jatavian Sanders. It's very easy to make them one of your backdoor stacks. If you're looking at a roster and saying, right now, what I don't have is a player that can give me a stack, weak on stacks. And we know that having, like, I think it was Mike Leone of Best Ball, ETR wrote in his Best Ball manifesto last year, the updated version, that teams with 0 stacks on their roster had a minus 30% win rate compared to teams that had, 6 to 9 players stacked, experienced a positive win rate improvement of 30%. So we know that stacking increases your odds of winning. So why would we not be looking for these little backdoor stacks? And one of the backdoor stacks that I like at the minute, although you do need to be looking for one of the pieces early, is the Titans. And it's Calvin Ridley, to me, feels undervalued at pick 54. I understand some people are just really struggling with Calvin Ridley these days. But then you've got Cam Ward all the way down at pick 160, Alec Pierce at pick 198, Chig Okonkwo at 200. Now, Chig Okonkwo is probably never going to develop into the player we might have hoped he would have done a few years ago. And then you've got Tyler Lockett, but Chig Okonkwo is somebody who can give you those spike weeks. We've seen that from him. So I just think that there's enough there that I want to have some exposure to the Titans, not as a team that I'm building my entire roster around, but as a team that I'm saying this is going to be my second or my third stack on this team if I've got 3 quarterbacks.
I love the Okonkwo call. I think that he's vastly. Hey, I remember we were on a live stream. We told someone to start Jonnu Smith, and then immediately from that point on, he was a monster. So we're out to it early, folks. We're out to it early, folks, here on the Best Ball live stream. Chig Okonkwo, potentially this year's Jonnu Smith. You heard it here first on May 19th, 2025. Chig Okonkwo. Because, look, last year, really strong finish. It's the same coaching staff. I think that matters so much when you're talking about he's part of their plans. And yes, you have a bunch of rookie wide receivers. I don't think the Titans are convinced like, oh, one of these guys is going to be Cam Ward's guy. I think they're like, hey, we took a bunch of shots. We'll see who sticks. We got Lockett as a veteran guy while the rookies kind of get acclimated, and we have Calvin Ridley. He's the number 1 wide receiver, but what's his ceiling? Like, we haven't seen it from him ever since he came back from his suspension. It's been kind of lackluster, even if his usage has been good. So I think Okonkwo playing in a contract year, look, he's a monster after the catch. And like you said, like he can make big plays, and he doesn't even necessarily need a lot of volume to get it done. And there's an opportunity for targets. So I think that's a really good pull.
We don't need to hit on this last team quickly. We don't need to hit on them for much more than a quick one, since we already talked about them already. But Andrew, you put the Texans in this section. So when you're stacking the Texans, is there any particular players that you find yourself drawn to, or is it just trying to take shots and just sprinkle exposure across the many pass catching options that CJ Stroud has right now?
Yeah. Look, CJ Stroud is going, how many picks after compared to last year? He was like a 6th, 7th round pick last year, and now he's the QB 16.
132 in underdog ADP and going as QB 19 currently over there.
Yeah. So with a player like Stroud as a more pocket passer, not going to win with his legs, you have to stack with him. And to me, I grabbed Nico Collins and I'm going to stack up the Houston Texans. And we saw Nico Collins get hurt last year too. What if he misses time? Jayden Higgins, Jalen Noel, Christian Kirk, all these guys you can get, and you're getting a Texans offense that we've seen be prolific with CJ Stroud when he's healthy and upright, playing in a dome against the AFC South teams that have terrible defense. I just think it's such a buyback spot for CJ Stroud. Like last year, it felt, man, how do I stack CJ Stroud with Tank Dell, Diggs, and Nico Collins? Like, you couldn't do it. Now you can stack them all up. So I think the Texans they're just vastly underpriced, and I want to buy the dip on CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I'm definitely in on the passing game. And if you want to see us drafting teams, we will be back drafting teams 2 weeks today. We'll be diving into our first best ball stream of the offseason, and then we will be back every single week all the way until the season kicks off. Myself, Andrew, we're both putting in loads of work to the Fantasy Pros Best Ball Kit, and we'll be here talking about the strategy, stacks, sleepers, and so much more, which we think are important to it. Every couple of weeks, we'll be on different platforms drafting. And if you want to draft along with us, all you've got to do is be here with us Mondays, 4 p.m. Eastern, over on Twitch, and you'll see us live. The replays will be elsewhere, but live, this is where the hardcore people are. Come and join alongside us, and make sure you're here with us. From myself and Andrew, appreciate everyone hanging out tonight. We will see you again in a couple of weeks.